All right, for our third and final video for Marxist theory, we're going to talk about capitalism as an oppressive system. So Marxists would argue that capitalism is necessarily oppressive because it relies on the exploitation of workers. Those who own businesses, because capitalism relies on profit, they try to pay workers as little as possible so that their profits remain as high as possible. And so it's sort of naturally exploitative because they're using the workers kind of as um, almost pieces in the machine towards them earning a better and better life. Um, a Marxist also argues that capitalism encourages workers to equate themselves with their jobs. So that the person might not think of themselves as a mother first or as someone who likes to write poetry, but as a factory worker or a letter carrier. Um, they really want people to think about themselves as the same as the work they're doing, which serves to kind of separate them from their own personal interests and roles in other places, like their role in their family or their role with their friends. And also to kind of equate their value with the value they do as workers. So when we hear someone say they want to be a productive member of society, what that usually means is that they want to work in the society, right, and help move the society forward through their labor. Um, it is also why a lot of people go to college for an attempt at a better job or to go to trade school, right? That we see ourselves and our importance as workers, and the need that we have to make money in order to maintain ourselves and our families. Um, but it starts to dictate decisions that a lot of people make in terms of what college to choose, what major to choose, or if it's a trade school, which trade to choose, because capitalism asks us to think of ourselves as workers first before anything else. So I brought in this visual from a survey done in Singapore about jobs that were considered essential and non-essential during COVID-19. Um, and I wanted to do this because it gives kind of a capitalist um, value system, right, of how we value different people, but it also shows how things shift based on the economy of the time, right? While we're in quarantine, some of these jobs have become more important than they used to be, right? All of a sudden, a delivery man is considered a highly essential job when that wasn't true when everyone was in quarantine. So because the economy has shifted, our value system has shifted, at least temporarily, perhaps permanently. But you can also see on the other side the non-essential jobs like artist. Um, Seeing something like this might affect a person's decision to whether or not to study art in school, or it might affect a parent's decision about encouraging their child to do art or encouraging their child to study art in school. Um, but kind of similarly, we see the value system shifting where we see a human resource manager is listed as a top 5 non-essential job during COVID-19, whereas they would probably be not on that list in other times. So this is kind of showing not only how our value systems change with the economy, but also how our sense of value in ourselves and whether or not we count as essential um, is tied up with our work, right? With the kind of labor that we do. So I wanted to kind of get into how Marxism would characterize capitalism. So they would look at the influence of competition. So in capitalism, people are trying to get something more or something better. And that can be a couple different kinds of comparisons, right? I might be trying to get something better than what I had before, or I might be trying to get something better than what somebody else has. Um, and so that's where we get into competition, right? Because there's a limited number of things. And if I want something better, that means that somebody else is going to have something worse, right? That the cost of one person rising is somebody else falling. Um, that kind of necessarily creates conflict, right? That we are in conflict for a limited number of resources that capitalism says that we should be grabbing up as much as possible to make our lives better. Um, but oftentimes the people who have the most wealth, who have the most power, will pit the middle and lower classes against one another so that people with less power and influence and resources are using their time arguing over the resources they share rather than going after the resources that the wealthy have. I think we get into this a little bit when we talk about kind of the 99% versus the 1%, right? The 1% has a lot of wealth, but most of us are spending our time kind of struggling to keep and maintain our jobs in competition with other people who have kind of similar qualities and characteristics. We're not going after the resources that the very wealthy have. So that kind of conflict is something that the people in power can use to maintain their power, because everyone else is so busy fighting with themselves that they aren't fighting with the wealthy. Marxists would also characterize capitalism as predatory. So because capitalism is encouraging consumers to buy, it uses particular tactics to encourage people to buy things. And among those is highlighting people's insecurities. So I included an advertisement for an early women's razor. Women didn't always shave their armpits and legs, but due to kind of changing fashion and also razor companies' desire to sell more razors, the company started kind of highlighting the unseemliness of women's hair to embarrass women into buying more razors. And so that's kind of what this ad is getting at here, right? The afternoon gowns are made with semi-transparent yokes and sleeves. They have sheer materials. And so if you have all of these things that you and your hair is showing, you need to manage it. And guess what? Gillette has a solution for you, right? It has a ladies' razor so that women can manage their sort of unseemly body hair. The last to keep in mind is that Marxists would characterize capitalism as colonialist. So that's the idea that capitalism exploits underdeveloped areas, often in other parts of the world, for the economic gain of either the country or the company. So we might be looking to those underdeveloped areas for additional resources, or for labor, or for other markets to sell to, or sometimes all three. But we are expanding our interests into those areas in order to feed either the country or the company that's doing the expansion. Another kind of key feature of capitalism is the idea of commodification. And part of that is thinking about the values that we put on a commodity. And those are like things that we can have or trade. And so the value of a commodity doesn't come from its use value, what you actually use it for. So here I have a picture of a Furby. I might actually use a Furby to play with it with a child. I might use a Furby to make a big pile of other stuffed animals and use it as decoration. That's its use value. What do I get out of it for what I actually do with it? That's not where the value of a commodity comes from. The value of a commodity can come from either its exchange value, what I can get for it, right? And this is a Furby in a box that's been unopened, so I might be able to get a few $100s for it. That's different from the value I would get from just using it myself. Or it could come from the sign exchange value, which is the prestige that and social standing that this product would give. So the Furby, like many sort of toys around Black Friday and Christmas time, there's always like that one really special toy, and if you get a hold of that one that year, it has some sign exchange value because the person who gets it has social status because they got the thing that everybody else was trying to get. And so in that case, the value of the commodity rests upon what you can get out of having it. What can I trade for it? Or what kind of prestige do I get for it? And so that's why I specifically included a Furby in a box, because that toy isn't being used. Right? If it was originally designed to entertain children, that's its use value, and that's not what's happening here. Instead, it's having sort of a collector value, where the person is keeping it in the box because they have their eye on the future value of what the toy is going to be worth. Now, what tends to happen in capitalism is that we relate with people and objects as commodities rather than as other human beings, or in this case, just a product, right? A toy that you could give a child. So we might befriend people who are more powerful than us because we think they might protect us if we need help. Or we befriend someone who's higher up on the work chain than we are in the work hierarchy because we hope that they might promote us one day. In that case, we're commodifying the people around us. We're treating them as sort of properties that can be traded as opposed to actual human beings. So to wrap up our work on Marxist theory, I wanted to kind of think about some key Marxist skills for students. One of those is research. Right? So a Marxist always talks about how the economic system is really important for understanding the time period or a piece of art or an event. So research becomes really important. We want to understand the economic and social context of whatever we're researching. We would also continually ask questions like, so what, to uncover ideology. So if we find ourselves surprised that a woman proposes to a man, we might ask ourselves, so what? Why is it so surprising to us? What kind of norm does that defy? And the more we can ask ourselves those questions, the more we can peel back and get a view of our ideology. We would also kind of carefully consider how we want to relate to the people on campus. So our fellow students, faculty, staff, someone you just pass by in the parking lot. Since we know that capitalism encourages commodification of people, we can be really conscious about how we want to interact with the people around us, especially if we want to make sure not to commodify them. And then last, because Marxism and Marxist theory is about making a real world change, you might think about how you could use your own work, for example, the essays you produce for a class, to make real world changes. Right? So things aren't necessarily an intellectual exercise, but they can be a vehicle for making the world around us a better place. I hope this information is helpful. Please feel free to reach out to me if you need any clarification on Marxist theory. Thanks.